Hello, welcome to Peace Propaganda, a twice-weekly show about living peacefully. This is Adam.
And this is Becky.
We are broadcasting not quite live from sunny, beautiful south side of Chicago, where the snow has finally melted.
Yay!
You can actually leave the house without being accosted by Yeti. No, I'm kidding, of course. Yeti is a gentle, beautiful creature of the north. But we got a wonderful show for you planned today. We're really excited. As you know now, we're doing 2 episodes a week, so be sure to subscribe. Don't just catch a random episode here and there. You have no idea what you might miss. We had a great show on Wednesday. If you didn't hear it, go back and we talked about simplicity and living the simple life. We had a lot of fun with that.
And actually, I wanted to make a little amendment to the simplicity show because I think there's an important point to be made. So when we talk about simplicity, we're talking about sort of a way of life as opposed to it's sort of more qualitative than quantitative. And so what we're not saying is that to live a simple life you have to be poor.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's a really important point to make because I think a lot of times people conflate those two ideas and they think that, to live the simple life you have to live a meager existence and sort of not have any belongings and
Right.
that kind of thing. But that's really not what we're advocating. I mean, that's if you want to live that way, then feel free to live that way.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
But if
I certainly wasn't.
Enjoy...
I didn't want to give the impression that I think everyone should be a farmer. I did talk about gardening a bit, but and to me that's part of simplifying, but doesn't have to be part of everybody's simplification portfolio.
You can be a very wealthy farmer.
That's right.
There's nothing wrong with being wealthy. I think. Something important to understand about wealth is that it is a sign of how much you are giving to the world. Because when you give to the world returns the favor in the form of wealth, right? Because when you offer a valuable service that people appreciate, they are willing to pay for it, and that's how you gain wealth.
That's perfectly true. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I just wanted to make sure that people don't think I'm saying, don't have money. Money is evil. No,
we are not saying that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then we wanted to clarify also about MaidSafe. We talked about that on our Saturday show last Saturday. We had a lot of fun with that. This MaidSafe, if you didn't catch last Saturday's show, it's very briefly. It's just a encrypted, decentralized internet protocol which would allow file sharing on a massive scale that would ease people's concerns about government or corporate snooping. And so there's 2 clarifications we wanted to make. One is the release date. It's being released in a few days here on the 8th, only for development purposes. There won't be any user-based apps yet. They have some stuff in the pipeline that they promise will be forthcoming a few weeks after that. And also there was an issue with, I guess MaidSafe has a license agreement, which...
Well, so they have 2 separate kinds of licenses, right? So they have
explain.
one, or they have one that's kind of the typical open source license that allows everybody to use it for free. And if you're writing open source software and you want to incorporate MaidSafe, or you want to write an app on top of MaidSafe, you can use it for free. But if you are doing a commercial project where you're going to be making money off of what you produce, you have to pay a percentage of the income to MaidSafe. It's 1%, I believe.
Yeah.
So it's a commercial license.
Even in there, I think there's some wiggle room because you can do a commercial project without necessarily paying the fee.
Yeah.
My understanding is the fee is if you associate with MaidSafe in some particular way, like you're part of the MaidSafe, wider ecosystem.
Okay.
I'm to be honest, I'm not really sure. If this is something that you're interested as a listener, if you're a developer, I encourage you to go to maidsafe.org. That they have technical explanations of these things. I'm not
an expert in licenses.
But the gist of it is you can use MaidSafe, you can develop for MaidSafe on a profit-based system without paying them. It is totally open source. There's just an option for people who choose to take it that you will get some additional benefits through the MaidSafe people that would cost you some money. So I hope that clears it up at least somewhat.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Becky, you brought in an article for us today from a rather well-known figure.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, it's not an article, but it's a quote from Jon Stewart, and I think it focuses on one of the things that seems to be on a lot of people's minds, and it's this the campaign contribution ruling that was recently put out.
Yeah. So maybe we should give just a little bit of background for those. I know we have some listeners who just. As a matter of principle, do not follow anything political. But just as a little bit of context, the Supreme Court of the United States did just rule that money is free speech and that you should have the ability to give unlimited amounts of money to campaign contributions. So there is no longer any limit on the amount of money that any candidate can raise through campaign contributions from domestic parties, is my understanding.
Right. So. Okay, so we'll discuss the sort of details of that in a bit, but first I want to kind of get this Jon Stewart quote in because it's kind of amusing, which is his that's his deal, right?
He's a funny man, yeah.
He's a comedian. So he says, "Oh, right. It's the whole money equals speech as a way to further amplify big donors' influence on politics. Because for some reason, money equaling money wasn't getting it done." Okay. So
go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I think something to sort of keep in mind when you're listening to Jon Stewart is that it's not necessarily his intention to be informative. It's his intention to make you laugh. Which
he's an entertainer first and foremost.
Yeah, and that's a noble goal. People need to laugh for sure, especially in these times. But I think there's sort of a common misunderstanding of money and a failure to see it as transactional and communicative. It's a communication of value, right? It's an exchange of value, and it is speech. It's to limit that is limiting freedom of speech.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I tend to agree with that, and I would put it to someone who thinks that there should be limitations put on that. I'm wondering what the principle at work there is. So if the government can tell you what you can and cannot spend your money on, where does that end? What is the principle at work there? Because this fundamentally that's what anarchism or libertarianism is about. It's about not making arbitrary rules that some people get to decide for other people. It's about finding principles that make sense and then applying them across the board evenly as a rule of law to everyone. And
right.
so if you say, oh, well, you can spend your money on anything, sure, you have that freedom, except you can't spend your money on these particular people in these particular circumstances, that is very inconsistent. And that's
right.
not something that we're okay with.
And I think another thing to understand is that when people do try to tell you what you can't spend your money on, what they're really what's really sort of happening is that a problem in the economy is being highlighted, but people are trying to ignore it by just shoving it under the rug and saying, no, you can't spend your money on that. We're going to ignore the fact that this market exists and that in itself is the problem, right? So the fact that there is a market for public offices is a problem, right? I mean, it's sort of the source of all the problems, really.
Yeah. Well,
so the fact that people spend their money on those public on putting people into public offices is just highlighting the problem. And so, honestly, I guess I would say that I'm a fan of any sort of ruling that highlights the real problem.
Yeah, it's interesting because even in that quote that Jon Stewart said, the end of it there was like, oh, because money being just money, wasn't good enough or something like that.
Yeah,
it's interesting because I think he sort of gets at the heart of it and then sort of takes a turn out of nowhere on us. But hey, we got the music coming up, and I'll finish that thought in just a second after this. I want to take this opportunity to tell you about Sean's Outpost, a homeless outreach program which has provided over 20,000 meals to the homeless in Northwest Florida. They're also funded entirely through Bitcoin donations. They are proving that we can address the problems in our community without the state, without its predatory welfare programs, and without its Ponzi money. Recently, Sean's Outpost launched its newest, boldest initiative, Satoshi Forest, a 9-acre homeless sanctuary where they are teaching permaculture, aquaponics, and self-sufficiency to the homeless residents. No one sticks a gun in anyone's face and makes them donate to Sean's Outpost, and yet, every day, people do. Please consider donating to this inspiring cause. Visit seansoutpost.com. That's SEANS outpost.com. And we are back here at the Peace Propaganda Studios. Also known as what were you calling it earlier?
The Unicorn Double Rainbow Studio. Is that what we want to go with?
What does it mean?
what does this mean?
What does this mean? Well, hey, just as a way of a reminder, make sure that you are subscribing to the show so that you catch both of our weekly episodes. We broadcast now on Saturdays and Wednesdays, and you don't want to miss any of the wonderful things
exciting conversation.
Yeah, any of the wonderful things that Becky might say, or any of the enraging things that I might say. And should any of those things enrage you sufficiently, please feel free to contact the show, because we love to interact with the listeners. We have a lot of fun doing that. Especially the past couple of weeks, we've had a lot of people contacting the show, and it's been wonderful. Okay, so we were talking about this new campaign finance ruling from the Supreme Court, which is sort of atypical here on Peace Propaganda, but sometimes
it's an interesting enough conversation, and there's some. I actually think it's like a pretty positive ruling, so it's worth it's focusing on,
and it's timeless. We don't really cover the news per se, but this is sort of this is more of a philosophical issue for us. So I was saying before the break that Jon Stewart sort of gets it in that quote where he says that, money being money wasn't good enough. Now it has to be speech. Well, I would put it to Jon Stewart and people who are concerned that now suddenly the powerful moneyed elite are going to run the government. I guess my question is, who do you think was running the government before this ruling? I mean, are you serious?
Yeah,
right. What rose-colored glasses are you wearing?
That's sort of the thing about sort of media coverage and just the way the information comes out these days. It always people are still sort of shocked when they find out about the corruption, right? Because it's sort of beyond understanding the level of corruption. Like with House, if you've watched House of Cards, I haven't kept up with it. I've watched a few episodes, and then I was kind of like, all right, I can't even deal with watching.
I confess,
this.
I've watched every episode.
Yeah. So, but it is shocking because it's so like outrageous. It's like, really, there are people who are doing this. It's pretty hard to imagine
hard to accept for a lot of people.
And right, because honestly, because most people couldn't do those things to others, because most people, 80% of the population are, good, upstanding people who just want to help out and be, good to others.
Well, that's what happens when you have this huge, centralized institution of violence that can exercise power over other people. It's going to attract, sociopaths who want to use violence to exercise power over other people. I mean, like moths to a flame. But that
actually reminds me of another thing that I saw today. Someone posted let me see if I can find it here. It may take.
Well, you take a look for that. What I was going to say, just briefly about the campaign finance thing, just to capstone what I had just said, is I think that contrary to how it's being spun, allowing unlimited donations will actually, to use their parlance, it will actually make things more democratic, because the fact of the matter is the huge money elite were already buying the elections. I mean, it's just, how much more obvious could it be that rich, powerful people run the United States government and really every government?
Sure.
And so as difficult as it may be to accept, allowing people who are maybe slightly less well-connected but still rich to participate in that process is, in fact, widening the base of people who run the government.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I think democracy is an evil and unjust system any way you slice it. But the fact is, even under its own internal logic, allowing more people to run the government, even though they may be rich, evil people, is in fact more democratic than the way it was prior to this ruling.
Yeah, and I mean, I think in general, whenever you hear that a ruling is for more freedom in any form, really, it's a positive thing, and it's moving us in the right direction, even if it feels, like, oh, this is just more of the same thing. Well, there's a spectrum, and we are, I believe, moving in the right direction.
Yeah,
so.
That's sort of both. The arguments against this ruling fail on both counts. Again, you just laid out the philosophical reason. More freedom is a good thing, and what I was talking about is the practical application. That in fact it is more democratic.
Yeah. So you made a point about sort of the people in government being sociopaths, and it reminded me
not all of them, of course.
No, I mean, yeah, it's a sort of
it's a
system
tendency.
that consumes humans, and turns out the best sociopaths, at the top. I don't know. I mean, it's all kind of
evil.
I don't know. I don't like. Yeah, I don't like to judge the people in it, because I think that most of them came in with good intentions, and they wanted to help the world.
I would agree
they
with
wanted
that.
to make change, and they just it's easy to get caught, get your mind sort of caught in the system.
And the more earnestly that you want to help people, the less well you're going to do in government, because that's not what it's about.
Not what it's about. Yeah,
fundamentally,
it's true. So. Yeah, actually, and so that's a perfect segue to this thing that I saw posted on Facebook. It's just an image of a I don't know, a man he looks like in his 60s with a little girl. And it says, "Did you know self-made millionaire Harris Rosen adopted a Florida neighborhood called Tangelo Park, cut the crime rate in half, and increased the high school graduation rate from 25 to 100% by giving everyone free daycare and all high school graduates scholarships." And the person who posted it made the suggestion that maybe this person should be the president of the United States. And my kind of first thought when I saw that was, I really doubt that this person would want to be the president of the United States, because it seems like what he's concerned with is helping people, not having power over them.
Yeah,
right?
It fundamentally misunderstands the difference between voluntary charity and, forcible redistribution of property.
Right. And I think it's, if what I'm reading here is true, then what this man is doing is really beautiful. And,
I've heard that story before. I believe it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It is beautiful. And that's, I think that's a perfect, it's funny that whoever posted that on Facebook, sort of ran with it in a statist direction, and people, typically statists will then turn around in the same breath and argue like, oh, well, we can't rely on, voluntary charity to solve problems. People are just way too greedy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
What?
I mean, it's, I think the more we start to, I think people are starting to realize that it is the people who aren't in the government. It is the charitable people who happen to be wealthy because they're giving to the world, who are making the difference.
Yeah, I think there's a spectrum there, and this ties into what you were talking about before, is that a lot of people out there want to help the people around them. Mm-hmm. Some people have the means to do it just out of the kindness of their heart. They can literally just take their property and give it to others. And I think that's wonderful. I encourage that as much as possible. Other people don't have that opportunity. Want as they may to help others out of just the kindness of their heart, they're not able to. They don't have those resources. They can't buy a town or whatever that guy did. But those people, they enter a marketplace, and they sell what they can do, they can offer at the lowest price, or the highest price that people are willing to pay, which is the lowest price that the market will bear.
Everybody has something to offer, and that's what's beautiful about capitalism. It lets everybody have different skills to offer the world.
Exactly. I see charity as a spectrum, which includes profit making. So okay, we'll be right back with more of this youth propaganda. Hey Becky, I was having this dream the other night where I was taking a test and then all my teeth fell out and then everybody died.
Wow, Adam, that sounds pretty intense. But there are people who can help you interpret those.
Really? Where?
Well, during the last weekend in April, students from the School of Metaphysics, aided by professional dream coaches from dreamschool.org, will be fielding calls from around the world, answering questions about dreams and interpreting them for 54 hours straight.
Wow. How can I get in contact with them?
You can call them at 773-427-0155 from 6 p.m. Central Time on April 25th to midnight on April 27th with your dream questions.
Wow, I'm definitely going to do that. Where can I find more information?
They have a Facebook page called 26th Annual National Dream Hotline Weekend.
26th Annual National Dream Hotline Weekend. I'm definitely going to go to that Facebook page.
Good. It sounds like you have some real stuff to work out.
Told you we'll still love each other. You can stand under my umbrella. You can stand under my umbrella. Ella, Ella, under my umbrella. Ella, Ella,
All right, we're back. I want to do a quick shout out to Psychotropic from Reddit, who brought to our attention the feedback that in the Wednesday show, the Simplicity show, there was a little bit of echo in my sound.
A little bit of a glitch here in the Double Rainbow Studios.
And we just want to let you know, if any feedback that you all have, we love to hear it. It's always appreciated. We're open to anything that you have to say. If you have nasty things to say, get them off your chest. Say them.
That's right.
Like, get the anger out, because it's good. It's good to say what you need to say, and we love to hear it, because it gives us a chance to interact with you guys. And if you're nasty to us, I've been in a place in my life where I would shoot nasty back at nasty, but I'm not there anymore. So, I'll handle it calmly.
That must be exhausting.
Yeah, it is, right? That's kind of the thing about being nasty.
Yeah. But I completely agree, Becky. And actually I've had some conversations with listeners where they've come to me and they've said, you said blah, blah, blah on such and such episode, like, what are you talking about? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And really it just turned out that I maybe wasn't very clear, and I was able to clarify it to the listener, and they were like, oh yeah, actually that does kind of make sense. Or in some cases they, brought some things to my attention, and I, sort of thought about what I had said, and I sort of came to the conclusion, maybe I was wrong there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's helpful, please.
Yeah. And if you ever have questions about things that we say, or you want us to elaborate more on it, just anything really, because we really like hearing from you guys.
And so of course you can reach us at host.peacepropaganda@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at Peace Podcast, Facebook at Peace Propaganda. We got the YouTube channel going now. You can always find us on Reddit too. That's a great way to communicate. I'm Mises 2 Pieces. That's MISES, the number 2, and then Pieces, like War and Peace.
And I'm Beck11, BECK11.
BECK11. Yeah, please contact us there. We have a lot of fun on Reddit and Facebook and Twitter and all that. So join the community, please.
Yeah.
Okay. So, anyways, before the break, we were talking a little bit about how charity and profit making are sort of the same thing, along the same spectrum. I think. Profit making sort of has a dirty, taint to it, and for good reason, because the fact is there are so many corporations in bed with government that use the violence of the state to, basically extract rent from the rest of the economy through the forms of their profits. I'm talking about things like Monsanto and Halliburton, these companies that rely on legislation to stifle the competition and, for things that we all need.
But as peaceful people, let's kind of reclaim the idea of profit as our own, and recognize it for the positive that it is, because profit is really just, like I said earlier when I was amending the simplicity points, profit is really just the evidence that you are serving your fellow man. You are giving to the world of yourself, and the world is returning the favor, because that's how life works. When you give and you create a vacuum, nature doesn't like vacuums. It fills them in with more of what was removed. And so when you give away your wealth, your material or immaterial wealth, it comes back to you, and it usually comes back to you multiplied.
That's interesting sentiment. I tend to agree. Yeah, if you put something that people value out there, then they're going to repay that.
Yeah.
Typically speaking, the world is imperfect, unfortunately, but yeah, generally that is the case. And it's, so let's look at the people who make profit that aren't evil. Because there's a lot of them. Half of all businesses in the United States are small businesses. Sort of as defined, I think, is like 50 employees or under. The folks who come by my grandma's house to mow the lawn. They're awesome, and they charge like $20, and they do it, and they're done in 15 minutes, and they love their job. I talk to them all the time, and my grandma loves having them there. She can't be out there with a lawnmower, and it would take me a lifetime to figure out how to do it as well as they do it.
Yeah.
It's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we're starting to see more of this sort of generosity appearing as, the economy of appreciation starts to emerge for, artists and things like that. People
like
trying
Etsy.
to support. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also I think, as that's happening, people at the top of even big corporations are starting to see that you get more by making your customers happy and making them trust you and making them see that you want what's best for them, and so there are some CEOs at the top of very big companies that are saying, maybe I don't really need all of these billions, maybe this is excessive and I couldn't even really use all of it, and so I'm gonna spend the money on things that are of more value to my fellow man. You know?
That's true. And insofar as that happens, that's wonderful, and I applaud it.
But you can't force it to happen. It has to be an internal shift in viewpoint.
But also, as people who are not billionaire CEOs, we also can't rely on it. So, and that's where, sort of the philosophy of agorism comes in. And, that's kind of what we were talking about in the Wednesday show about simplifying. You're becoming less and less dependent on the rapacious corporations that, tend to run the government.
Yeah.
Or vice versa, however you want to look at it. The fact is they walk hand in hand, marching us through the gates of hell. But so the point, I think generally the point that we're trying to make here is that try to have an open mind about these
people
concepts
who are wealthy and about profit.
Yeah, and I know most of our listeners already do. So I guess really what we're saying is. Try to encourage that in others,
Yeah. And I find that actually when I'm talking to people who are not necessarily anarchists or who are more left anarchists, when I instead of sort of trying to combat their views, when I sort of absorb what they're saying and then in a calm and peaceful way just sort of direct them to the ideas that profit is valuable and necessary for the purpose of creating things, really. They're receptive to those ideas if you're not combative. Because they do want, most people they want to make things better, and they don't know how necessarily. And so if you kind of are loving in your way of interacting with them, they hear you,
And it's at least in my experience, it starts with a very deep conversational understanding of economics. You need to be able to synthesize, economic principles, such as what profit represents in a market free of coercion.
At least at a high level, like at a general level. You don't have to even necessarily get into the nitty-gritty of it, because most people,
they don't want to.
Yeah. But
that's what I'm saying. Conversational economics. You need to be able to explain these things, as thematic components in society. What it kind of represents. And, there's a lot of great resources out there that I'm sure many of our listeners already know, but I would, strongly recommend Robert P. Murphy at consultingbyRPM.com, the Tom Woods Show. And these guys are available on YouTube, and they have their own podcasts, so definitely worth checking out. That's, a lot of my economics education I got through YouTube. So, so
approaching these conversations with an open mind is always the best way to do it. And don't ever assume that people are attacking you, because that's probably not what they're trying to do. Right.
And if they are, then they're just, they're just uncomfortable with themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, hey, really hope you enjoyed this Saturday's show of Peace Propaganda. And as always, you can contact us at peacepropaganda@gmail.com. Really hope you like the show. And hey, don't forget that we're going to have a Wednesday show. This is going to be our second ever Wednesday show. So, make sure you don't miss it. Subscribe to the RSS feed on SoundCloud or find us on iTunes. Give us a rating on iTunes because that's ultimately how people find us. And we do have the Amazon affiliate link. We have that up and running now. You can shop at Amazon.com, and if you use our link at no cost to you, you will give us a small commission. And that, helps us keep the lights on over here at the Double Rainbow Studios.
It's much appreciated.
Yes, would really appreciate that. And you can find that on the SoundCloud page, and if we have it in all the show notes. So really anywhere that you see the show, click on the show notes and you'll see the Amazon link. Really appreciate that. So thank you so much for listening to another episode of Peace Propaganda. This is April the 5th, 2014.
Have a great week.
Be happy. Don't worry, be happy. Ain't got no place to lay your head. Somebody came and took your bed. Don't worry. Be happy. The landlord say your rent is late.
What does this mean?